Okay, we're going to do confidence intervals about the variance or the standard deviation. The words here, point estimate, you're familiar with that. You're familiar with the confidence interval. These are words you've heard, but we're going to use the chi-square distribution, and this is the formula for finding it. You will actually be using StatCrunch, so you don't have to be as familiar. Degrees of freedom. This is what the chi-square distribution looks like. This is as the degrees of freedom increase, it starts to look a little more normal. That's the way the interval will look. Okay, that's your interval. You're splitting your alpha between the two tails is what you're trying to do. And here's all the vocabulary and the symbols that represent those. You have a left tail and a right tail, the chi-square. And this is the way the interval would look for the variance. Notice it's just the formula on one side and the formula on the other. Same thing, but that. Really, the formulas are not that important in that you're going to be using StatCrunch, and it knows it. So let's begin looking at the problem. Okay, we won't have to use this table, so don't worry about it. It says use the given information to find the number of degrees of freedom, your critical values, both your left and right, then find the confidence interval for sigma, which is the standard deviation. It is reasonable to assume that a simple random sample has been selected. Nicotine and menthol cigarettes, 90% confidence. N is 23 and S is 0.21. Okay, your degrees of freedom would be 22. Okay, now they're wanting you to figure these chi-squares. And in order to figure the chi-squares, we want to open up StatCrunch. Okay, we've got StatCrunch open. We'll also need a calculator just to do some of the arithmetic. So we want to go to Stat, we want calculators, and we want a chi-square calculator. Your degrees of freedom, we just said, would be 22. Now, let's figure what we want to go right here. This is what we're going to do based on our confidence level. It's 90%, so 1 minus 90% gives us 10%, and half of the 10% is 5%. 5% as a decimal is 0.05. But my degrees of freedom didn't take right, so let's put it in there again. 22, and this is 0.05. Okay, so this left side would be 12 point, notice it says 3 decimal places, 0.338. Okay, then it asks for the right side. Okay, well, we're going to change it from less than to greater than. We don't want that. We want 0.05 in the right tail, 0.05. Degrees of freedom still 22. And the chi-square for the right tail is 33.924. Okay, now to find the confidence interval. We're going to go to Stat, and we're going to go to Variance Stat. We'll have one sample, and we're going to use summary data. The sample variance. Notice that gave me the sample standard deviation as 0.21. So I'm going to have to go 0.21 and square it or multiply it by itself. And what do I get? So my sample variance then becomes 0.0441. But I need to put it over here. So 0.0441. Okay, the sample size, the actual size is 23. We want to find a confidence interval, and our confidence interval, we want it at 90% or 0.90, and we compute. All right, now these lower limits and upper limits are given as variances. So we need to take the square root of these to get it back to just the standard deviation, because this is sigma squared. We want it for just sigma. So let's pull this back up, and we want square root this time. So second square root, I'm going to put in the 0.028598852. Okay, then I'm going to do the same thing with the upper. Take the square root, and we're going to do 0.078635018. Okay, those are the two answers that I've gotten that I'm going to plug in. So the lower one would be, these are two decimal places, so it would be 0.17. The upper one was the second number I got here. It is 0.28. Okay, and we had that correct.